right, all right. As Maurice mentioned, this is an important panel, right? And to have Kevin here with us is quite unique. So Kevin is the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Commerce. And just start off, because you've been the private sector, public sector, love to just give your story, and then we can sort of jump into it.
Sure. Thanks. And first, before I begin, I just want to say thanks to Maurice and everybody for getting this together. He extended the idea to come and chat, and I said absolutely. Opportunities like this are near and dear to my heart about connecting and exchanging, and I think this is where we do a lot of the good thinking and a lot of community building. But my story, it starts city guy, big opportunity to get away to school, to have my schooling, but professionally, it starts with an opportunity on Wall Street, getting to know the financial machinations of American government and the biggest economy. I was an institutional bond salesman for 7 years, where I sold municipal bonds, corporate bonds, asset-backed bonds to pension funds, money center banks, and everybody in the financial system. What I learned, and I affectionately call it the American hustle. I learned about growth. I learned about coupon. I learned about value add. I learned about servicing. And I really got a good perspective about really, every day what our economy is looking for, how it interacts with each other, and how a lot of the real solid financial parts worked. And it just gave me a really fantastic perspective. After that, I started working for the government. I transitioned from Philadelphia and New York, and I started working for the government of Washington, D.C. And it again gave me another perspective of servicing and how important it is, the public sector, to creating and initiating growth. I worked under Mayor Anthony Williams, and some of you remember, or if you can, I'm not sure, I'm starting to show my age. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, many of the municipalities in the United States, they were in a bit of a fiscal crisis, and Washington, D.C. had an appointed chief financial officer in Anthony Williams. And so when everyone transitioned back to the government, when he eventually got elected mayor, it was that opportunity of fiscal responsibility and wanting to kind of get the city calibrated again. And I love telling the story about the Anacostia Waterfront Initiative and what is the Navy Yard space right now. What you see now, the redo of the South Capitol Street Bridge, the purchase of the Nats baseball team, we saw that rendering in 2000, and some people actually laughed and said, could it ever be? And I got a chance to see that. But that was a big opportunity, too, to see the machinations and the importance of intentionality, the importance of leadership on the public sector side to facilitate growth and actually have a balanced opportunity toward community equity. Just to hurry it up, Phil, just a little bit after that, I'm a good buddy of mine. Some of you all may know Jerry Lynch. Jerry and I, we got together because at the time when I was working for the city, he had just gotten started. And at that point, we created Jair's first fund. And Jair was interacting and doing great work with the city. And it also spawned a big opportunity for relationships with some pension funds that began to transition him to a space of being an investor developer. Lots of good stories there. I was appointed to run a community land trust to be able to work with what was the growing economy, the condominium economy in Washington, D.C., and then had another perspective at that point in running the land trust about how to, I don't want to say it, maybe catch the runaway train of growth in Washington, D.C., to be able to integrate affordable housing in what was a really, really strong and vibrant economy that was happening in D.C. And then after that, I jumped in the fintech business. I worked for a company called EverFi. And again, got yet another perspective in tech to really see what the desire is and how our economy was really managing what is yet another big growth phase, a big growth opportunity, and how fintech was evolving and how it worked. And especially in the financial spaces, because at some point, your skill set and your knowledge and your idea in building a business will, I believe, really, really revolve around your grip on the finances and the ability to manage your capital stack and how it involves in your industry and how you're able to grow your company. So that's where it is. And then it comes to a point where, all of those experiences kind of wrap themselves around Phil. And when it comes, I found myself in a great perspective of really understanding what it means to create and have all of the inputs of a very thriving economy and entrepreneurial operation, and then making sure you can balance it with some very good intentional public policy that needs to happen. So in a lot of the communities that we work in or that I worked in, it was very important to do that because you had some very, very intentional leaders. I grew up in a time where a guy named Marion Barry was the mayor of Washington, D.C. A guy named Harold Washington was the mayor of Chicago. There was a guy named Lee Jackson who was the treasurer of the city of Boston. Norman Rice was the mayor of Seattle. And you had Bradley in the city of Los Angeles. So it made for an opportunity of leadership and intentionality to meet with those opportunities to create opportunities that weren't traditionally there. That's the story, Phil. This is kind of how it comes to be. And then the opportunity now at the Maryland Secretary of Commerce, I believe that creates that synergy and meets at that intersection. I was not in a rush to get back into the government, so you all know. But Governor Westmore, who was recently elected, I think is a generational talent, and I think he brings that entrepreneurial attitude, that equitable development charge of being very aggressive and very intentional about how we want to, again, meet at that intersection of thriving entrepreneurship and balanced public policy to create really great equitable development. And so that's the story, my friend.
I tell you, Kevin, what an unbelievable background. And I didn't hear the applause after you said Westmore, so I'm just going to say it one more time, Governor Westmore, unbelievable. A lot of supporters who are here.
Yeah.
So you have this background, public-private partnerships, and now Secretary of Commerce for the state of Maryland. Give everybody a sense of the role. Like, what do you do? What's under your purview? Maybe give us an overview, and then we can sort of dig in.
Sure. The Department of Commerce is the state's chief economic development agency, and it encompasses just about everything that you can imagine. We're in charge of all of the business development, business retention, and also innovation. We do all of tourism, film, and the arts, all of the international investment and trade, and also all of the operations of connecting all of the other workings within the economy. It is a broad portfolio, but yet it is very, very important. We're a bit of the dot connectors, if you would, of what is the economy, the ecosystem that we all know about how we run and do things to get to our quality of life. It is a really challenging and also a really broad thinking, but yet a really, really big opportunity to really bring what the governor has laid out to say we can build an economy that can be great and robust and thriving and still do it in a very equitable way where it reaches all parts of the economy and all parts of the state. Maryland's a bit unique in that, unique in some sense, where we have, I believe, the breadth of economic opportunity. We have 23 counties in Baltimore City, and no less than 2 or 3 different economies that range from farming, fishing, and forestry to built-out biotech, life sciences, and AI, and aerospace engineering, and advanced manufacturing, all the way to mountains and strong tourism opportunities. So within that portfolio, we as leaders of the state, we have to be very sharp-penciled and very strategic about how we go about making sure that all parts of the economy gets balanced and we're able to reach through all of those sectors. And so that's kind of a bit of what the Department of Commerce does. And you look around in all of the states and all of the sovereign states in the United States of America, some are better than others at making sure that they leverage their assets, that they are sharp-penciled and very strategic thinking about how you grow the economy. And I think that's where the real work goes in, and I'm real proud to be a part of the Moore Miller administration and what we're doing and making sure we thrust Maryland and we begin to get our arms around it so we can take care of all of the Marylanders.
Sounds
so
great.
That's what we do. Yep.
So as you think about your portfolio, maybe we can sort of dial in a little bit on innovation. So
Sure.
TEDCO reports
Exactly.
into you. Obviously, there's a lot of work that TEDCO is doing around innovation. How do you think about it? Like, how do you think about spawning innovation? Like, what tools do you have in your toolbox to help make that happen?
Exactly. One of the great things that exists, I think, states that do it well and economies that do it well, they invest in great stakeholder organizations and entities that can move a little bit faster and a little bit more adroitly and be very specific to make sure companies and opportunities, you can quickly take advantage of them. We have TEDCO. I mean, many of you know, Phil, as you mentioned, it's the Technology Development Corporation of Maryland. And we also have MEDCO, the Maryland Economic Development Corporation. We have several entities and several opportunities where we can put them in position to move quickly and then create the innovation. I think what's important is to make sure that we connect it all to our very, very vibrant industries. I'm not sure if a lot of people know, but we have 12 military installations in the state of Maryland. And some of you may know that our biotech, our AI, our quantum, our aerospace engineering, advanced manufacturing, we're on the cutting edge of all of that research with Hopkins and everybody at the University of Maryland. And it takes a real great opportunity in tech transfer to be able to create and make sure we tweak that. Our job as the state and what I see our position to do is to make sure we can force multiply and put a lot of opportunities in position where it won't naturally and organically take place. And that's what I think we can do. And the job of government and the job of the state is to be able to help that. And then the VC space, and when you're looking at, as an investor, from my Wall Street days, we would be on the phone jumping up and screaming, when governments didn't move fast enough. We would always say and have to remember that, leaders and politicians, our ultimate job is to make sure we keep the economies going. We keep businesses running in the right place. And I think what we can do in the highest and best use of state money and state opportunities is to get in front of that capital stack and try to buy down risk and try to be very, very helpful as we can and create the spawning opportunity of the great market so we can bring in private investment. I think sometimes it gets a little out of kilter, you know what I mean, where there are tough opportunities where, you can either take the signal that the private market gives you to say, hey, maybe this industry or this opportunity is not ready for sound private sector investment. And then there's an opportunity for the state to come in and begin to create opportunities there and begin to create industries and support companies. And so that's where I think we can support and create innovation in that space. And it's very important for us to step in, support the ecosystem, again, buy down risk and create things that the market may not necessarily be able to do or growing companies may not have the financial capacity to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great concept, this notion of buying down risk, right? Investing in areas where there may not be the ROI today, but down the road, there could potentially be. And so as an investor, understanding the areas where you're buying down risk are critically important to track. And so you have VCs, you have founders who are out here. What's the best way for them to stay abreast of the areas where you all are investing so that they can follow along?
Yeah, sure. Number one, you can always get on the on the website. I think we have a pretty good and solid website and media exchange to keep everyone abreast of all of the industry sectors that we're in and a bit of the projects and new companies that begin to evolve. And if you stay connected, in that way you can really begin to see where the state's making investments, where new companies are spawning, and you can really see where the state and where opportunities are bio the competitive advantages and really looking to build and support the ecosystems. I took a trip up to Bio. How many of you have done the Bio conference? There was the Bio conference in Massachusetts about 2 weeks ago. I don't know if anybody had ever experienced that. So Bio was great, and I happened to sit down and chat with a few investors, and the investors were really, really clear and responded to me and said, yeah, the state of Massachusetts had put over $1 billion into their bio and their industry ecosystem that had spawned a tremendous opportunity where now all of the private money, all of the venture capital has already coalesced itself and it's already begun to really capitalize on the industry. And I think those are the things that you can really take a look at. About a month ago, the governor made a great declaration about the state of Maryland beginning to work on offshore wind. I don't know if any of you have heard that opportunity. Well, that sent a signal out about what we're doing with our infrastructure, how we're going to build the ecosystem, and where the opportunities will be to begin to build out. What comes along with it? We have to connect our pipeline for education. We have to begin to connect our MDOT, all of our transportation systems. And again, everything that builds the ecosystem, which really creates, decreases the risk of all of the capital goes in and increases the opportunities for companies to be successful. And I think as you stay connected with those opportunities and begin to see those industries and how much the government, the legislature, the leadership from the executive, and everybody's moving forward again to put together all of the educational systems, the pipelines, to make for a growing industry, and it gives an opportunity to be to give very supportive companies.
Sounds
so that's
great.
what I think I would recommend for VCs. I see my good friend Eric Vargas there. Hello, Eric. How are you? he can let you know about it too. Good.
So, it's interesting, as you were talking about this, it's like Maryland is interesting for a number of different reasons, right? Maybe we can talk about each, and you can give your thoughts. And so one is, we sit here, and you have the DMV, right? You have the district, you have Virginia, and Maryland. They're all part of the same sort of geographic area. There's a lot of cross-pollination, but different jurisdictions. How do you work with those folks?
Yeah, and again, I'm not sure if we recognize the richness of our environment, but the DMV, if you were to draw a circle around it, the way we measure ourselves data-wise sometimes in terms of metropolitan institutions are in MSAs. And if you drew a 30-mile circle around our, Washington, D.C., we're the second largest economy in the United States of America, which is the most stable economy in the world. Our relationship with the federal government, the folks with the biggest checkbook in the world, the biggest landlord in the country, is absolutely opportunistic and competitive. It runs our economy. It's that relationship. And if you want to take a look at it, it's why we have one of the most, if not the most stable economy of any region in the United States of America. What that gives great way for is an opportunity to really tap into what are the great opportunities. I mentioned before that we have 12 military installations in the state of Maryland, particularly. The Department of Defense is in Virginia. What that means is that we're cooking up. The NSA is here. We're cooking up, and the federal government targets the research, it makes the connections with Johns Hopkins and our research opportunities to really begin to give the cutting edge opportunities for research. It's why we're one of the most vibrant economies, again, for biotech. Those are our competitive advantages about how we want to get our arms around the region. There's a reason why the Virginia corridor is really vibrant. There's a reason why out in Montgomery County, because it's next to NIH. There's a reason why we have all of these opportunities to take advantage of, and it's one of the most vibrant areas. Another note that I even, realized and got to know since I've started leading the state, our region is the most vibrant and effective place for small businesses. And I forget the specific number, but we are eons beyond any other MSA in the United States of America for the number of small businesses and the number of programs that we develop. And it's really, really significant, I believe, because it makes for a great economy and great opportunities for us to invest in our region. And when you begin to think about that in the DMV, that's where I think the big opportunities and how we begin to work together and make sure that we capture the synergies of everything that we do together. I mean, it's the Department of Defense, the Department of Health, NIH, and some of you may know the stuff that goes on at Fort Meade, at NSA, it's really incredible, and for us to take advantage of, I believe, as an economy.
Yeah, that sounds great. And so, Kevin, you have this broad purview now, right? You're
Yeah.
looking across, the state of Maryland, from, Baltimore City to Bethesda to Ocean City across. You've been at a venture-backed startup that grew into a pretty successful company. What do you wish you knew then? If you were sitting in the venture shoes or the founder shoes, like, what do you wish you knew about, the state of Maryland and sort of your world that would help you in our roles?
How much access there is to great research, great opportunity, and then connecting it to support to build a value-added opportunity to get there. It might sound complicated, but I learned a lot about finance. I knew how to raise money. I learned a lot about companies and managing companies and growing relationships. I knew a lot about the pieces, but I think the nexus is connecting a great vision and getting to that point where you can trust it, where you can say, hey, I know enough about infrastructure, and I know enough about industry growth, and I know enough about managing companies and capital stacks where a certain opportunity may begin to take flight. And again, for a venture-backed startup that I did in fintech, there were maybe there were a few because there was a risk space. And sometimes things don't add up on the pro forma. Sometimes it's not going to come out like you learn in business school to say, hey, you got to hit X on the marketing dollars. You got to put, everything here for your metrics to kind of add up to say, hey, here's Netflix. Okay, hey, here's Salesforce. Hey, here it is. Might not add up to that all of the time. Okay, sometimes it's going to take some real, guts. Those up. In my opinion, sometimes those are the easy ones because they pencil out really well. You know what I mean? Everything that pencils out really well, you can kind of, manage in the line. But it's those where you say, hey, it's going to take a little bit of muscle. It's going to take a little bit of grit to kind of I see an opportunity here to continue to work and kind of build a relationship and say, hey, everybody may not be rushing, right now, and capital flows aren't there, and the confidence that you would think the investing public or the investing sector needs is not there, but you can kind of make an opportunity of it. Phil, I've come up with the thought, and I actually tell people around the state, it comes down to it: no risk it, no biscuit, and everybody's going to line up with the easy stuff, I believe. You know what I mean? Everybody's going to line up, and you got to kind of say, hey, yeah, I might not be able to hit this three-pointer, but I think if I feel good and I get a wide open shot, I can kind of give it a shot and do it. So that's what I thought I would just go, maybe a bit higher risk tolerance, you know what I mean, based on, great research, great opportunity, but a real good feel to say, I feel good about it, you know what I mean, and that's the risk base, and that I would say I wish I had known. And I don't mean to go on and on, Phil, but it's just something that I believe you kind of learn over time, you know what I mean, that would be my thought. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And you talked about wind as being an area that the state is interested in.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk about some of the other areas that you're focused on now and that you see opportunity in over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, there are a lot. We talked about a lot of opportunity in the state of Maryland, and one that's a real big opportunity, I think, is in our tourism, film, and entertainment industry. The state of Georgia has really, done great work, and they're kind of a best practices or flagship, if you would, right now for what they've done in the entertainment sector. Yeah. I don't know if you guys are seeing all of these movies, but as the leader in the state of Maryland, I'm tired of seeing that Georgia peach after every good movie. But I'm seeing it, and it's a great opportunity to invest and build out that infrastructure. Georgia has now put together an entertainment and film opportunity that now rivals Hollywood. Hollywood is still going to be Hollywood, but they're on the map. And it has become a really, really great opportunity for the state of Georgia that they've seen, through, the leadership of Tyler Perry and other opportunities. But the state has also helped where they have created unlimited tax credits and unlimited opportunity to, again, to be a force multiplier to say, hey, come on, everybody come. And so we're looking at that opportunity just the same. You know, our entertainment opportunity, some of you may know, I mean, everybody knows about The Wire, you know, you may know about the Wedding Crashers. Some people may not know the number of movies that are actually made in the state of Maryland. When I got here, I was like, wow, we made that movie was made in Maryland? It was made in Maryland? But again, I think that's another big opportunity that I think we can invest in. And also, tourism is a big opportunity. We have miles and miles of shoreline, we have mountains, we have fishing and forestry, in addition to getting Baltimore on track as a very thriving place to do for an opportunity. So that's where I think there can be some real competitive advantages. And then also, we are just a leader and really should be, you know, the governor and I, we always talk about, we really should be #1 in the country in biotech and some of our life sciences and quantum with all of the assets that we have. That's what we're really going to be taking a very, very hard look at again about how we can support and be a force multiplier in getting those already vibrant pieces even more robust. We have Johns Hopkins and the University of Maryland here. Many people don't know that Hopkins gets more federal grant money than MIT. You know, we churn out, and I think I saw Maurice was here. We were at the quantum conference, being on the cutting edge in quantum. So we're going to take a real good look at, you know, where we as a state want to make a big bet in terms of what we believe will be a really, really vibrant opportunity to, again, to connect workforce, to connect our educational system, to make sure our infrastructure projects are all moving in one direction. So those are some of the big ones that we're really, you know, taking a look at, and we got to do some, again, you got to do some great research about, you know, where maybe the biggest ROI might be, and again, you know, where the most balanced risk and maybe even a good risk opportunity might be as a state in order to begin to support that.
Sounds good. Well, one more question before
Sure.
we open it up.
Yeah.
You know, how do you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion from your role? Like, what are the types of things you're trying to do to foster growth within diverse communities?
Yeah, and again, Phil, that's you know, that's one, and the governor we always talk about. It's just about being intentional and being very specific and making sure, you know, that's the leadership, I believe, a leadership and the will issue about diversity, equity, and inclusion, about what we aim to do. The governor in March, he was in office for less than 30 days, as some of you may have known. He created an executive order to make sure that we hit our numbers for minority-owned business participation in deals. We have a 29% requirement that's already been legislated. It wasn't any reinvention of the wheel, wasn't any big deal, but we had not, as a state, hit that number in the last 10 years, in the last 12 or 13 years, and the last time we even got close was 2015. So this was stuff that was already legislated. You know what I mean? We didn't have to go, you know, and make it up. It was just about every agency was required to make sure that 29% went to small, local, and minority-owned businesses. We just have to, again, to say, number one, let's begin to get the data and see what we can do to make sure that we're being intentional and making sure that we're creating opportunities for the real good reason of getting equitable development, but also it's great for the economy because small businesses are the bane of it. And so those are the things that we're, you know, putting in place. There's so many acronyms. Some of you may know we have financial facilities for every part of your growth as a company. We have early stage support, mid stage support, workforce support, if you want to do HR, all kinds of opportunities. And trust me, if we don't have it, we'll create it and can get into other positions to make sure that we support diversity, equity, and inclusion, and environmental and social governance, and everything that's important, again, to building equitable communities and making sure our corporations and our economy can support the really important, you know, breadth of making sure we have balanced communities.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Questions from the audience?
Come on now, I know somebody wants some money for something. I know somebody wants $30 million for a great idea, something in the early stage, early risk capital. Come on, somebody.
Hi there. Thanks so much for being here. I think some of us young people have never thought about the government as a place to start a VC career. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to some of the opportunities that there may be for young professionals in that realm?
Absolutely. Is Brandon here? Is Brandon? Good. Yeah, there's Brandon. Brandon works in our Office of International Investment and Trade at the Department of Commerce. If you want to really begin, I believe, to get to know access to industry, some of the real, opportunities about where the government can help and how businesses have to be very conscious of legislation and regulation, things that are really, really important to growth. It's a great opportunity to be there. We're right on the cutting edge of supporting companies and corporations as they begin to grow, and even when they get there, when you want to scale up. Many of you know, investors are going to be great investors and really challenge companies to make sure the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And you can kind of have a great window for a while, and for lack of a better term, get some free training on the investing side without taking the risk to really get to understand how some industries work, and even another great opportunity about how it interacts with the public. When I was in Philadelphia, New York, I spent a good time in Philadelphia, and I always wondered why. I went to school out in California and up in Massachusetts, but when I got back home, I always wondered why when people from the West Coast and companies would always come to the East Coast, they make 2 stops. They go up to New York to talk about money and get money, and they would always tell me, now I have to go down to D.C. to make sure I keep the money. I can find a way to keep it in the legislative opportunity. So that's the interaction, I believe, that working in the public sector can create, and even in the leadership space. So, and again, even in many industries in the workforce space, you can get some very, very valuable experience in terms of watching companies and seeing the growth of industries and how they interact with the public. I think it's opportunistic. Absolutely. Yeah.
Nasir Kadri, founder and managing partner at Zeal Capital Partners. Phil, you asked him a question around private-public partnerships, and you're in a room, Chris, full of, Kevin, full of venture capitalists. And how do you think about the role we play as you think about whether it's like brown bags or we have the ability to allocate large lump sums of capital into businesses across Maryland. Yep. And so how can we be helpful as you think about engaging the venture, private markets, the investors across the region?
Yeah, just continuing to be visionary and opportunistic. The concept of the P3 is just very, very valuable. And you all know it creates the opportunity for government to do big projects and think big and do really, really great things without the opportunity of having to overutilize or stretch too much with public dollars and taxpayers' money. The only way we get to do a lot of forecasting and do really, really big projects is to really, really get into some really, really, can sometimes be really difficult conversations with the pieces of government about wanting to spend $50, $100, $150 million, $200, $300, $400, $500 million on the project. A P3 can make that happen very quickly. What's important about it is to make sure that there's an equitable and very, very clear, thought-out way about how the returns are created. The bunch of venture capitalists can do a pro forma and really spell it out and kind of look at it about what the opportunities are down the path, but can we articulate it and can we advance it to the legislature, to the places in government to say, here's how it makes sense. Here's where the long-term partnership will come in and some of the agreements that are made about how it gets navigated. Those are the big opportunities, I believe, about what happens in P3s. VCs understand risk. Sometimes it's very difficult for a state to understand and digest risk and where it needs to be. Sometimes it tries to protect itself, sometimes where it makes it very, very difficult for VCs to kind of get involved, and it begins to bother the pro forma about how it works. But again, that way, the VC can say, hey, I'm working with a state in the ability to be very flexible and to be a great partner over a long period of time. Well, I believe really incent a big opportunity to do some of the bigger projects. And then once they get going, it really takes a great vision to be able to say, I'm going to continue to be a good partner, a good corporate citizen, as we continue to work with the public entity about, the amount of risk. And I know, we VCs, we get it, I get it, you know what I mean? You got to get compensated for the risk, you know what I mean? That's kind of where it is, and you got to get it lined up. That's the name of the game, and sometimes it just gets very, very difficult to negotiate with the state. But again, I would encourage the great visionary thinking, again, about how we can bring as many partners, as many opportunities to, again, protect everybody involved to the extent that we can and do some great projects. That would just be some feedback.
Good afternoon. My name is Ty Smith. I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships for an organization called the Common Mission Project, where I kind of work on ecosystem building.
Sure.
Public-private partners, venture capital, corporate. That's my W-2 job. My 1099 jobs, I'm also a faculty member of Bowie State.
Fantastic.
And I'm sure you know Dr. Bro and what she's trying to do. My question is about what government can do, particularly for under-resourced, under-acknowledged, undervalued systems like HBCUs. There are 4 here in the state of Maryland. For instance, College Park is an opportunity zone, but Bowie isn't. Now, I do know in the opportunity zone dynamic, Governor Moore can go and say, you know what, we're now going to make that an opportunity zone, which opens up all kinds of space for capital. The question is, and not just for the state, but I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of thought leadership with me, but for the federal government, what is the interplay between government, the venture capital community, public-private partners, and the universities? Does that make sense?
It does. Let me see if I can put it together. The essence is a big coordination opportunity and where it goes. Dr. Bro well and know Bowie State. In the University of Maryland, our university system of Maryland is is very good. We have 12 institutions, 4 of them which are HBCUs, and I'm pretty happy. I mean, obviously there could be more about how we interact and how we think and how we connect them with the opportunities in the enterprise, doing the enterprise zones for one opportunity. Where that goes is to, again, set a very specific example for the thinking about how we connect communities and how we connect all of the capital opportunities. One of the things that we did just this year, we had to set up an office, meaning the state, specifically designated to go after and chase federal government funding, hub contracts, hub opportunities, tech hubs, other big opportunities. Because the reality is that the federal government's kind of figuring it out too. We've knighted Baltimore, to be, an Equitech city and everything that comes along with it. So how we get that integrated is, again, to, do what we can with the assets that we have to begin to build the incubators. We have our Global Gateway program. Brandon can tell you about how we create soft landings for opportunities for foreign direct investment to be able to increase that. And again, we have one of the most vibrant educational systems in the country. We're the second most educated state in the United States of America. It's a really, really big opportunity for us to connect our pipeline and do all of the great, wonderful things, and include our HBCUs to kind of get the nexus of it. And I hope I answered your question, but I think the bottom of it was, we're working at it, and we still got to continue to leverage our great assets. It takes a pretty good strategy to do that, but we're getting there.
Just a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
A more specific idea around what could the venture capital community, particularly this community of venture capital, do at, say, a Bowie State or a Morgan State or a Coppin to help those students who are struggling, who will never, ever be able to compete with the Stanford? Because Stanford it's just a completely different atmosphere in terms of how they do it. What could this community go out and say to that community, hey, let me jump in with the backing of the government?
You can begin to bring the private dollars and begin to do that. So, traditionally, or, the way it happens usually, I don't want to say, you don't make these generalizations, but there comes a big opportunity from the state or public entity, then our universities or another, entity, comes in, and then the private. I'll give you an example. For Quantum, about a couple months ago, the state of Virginia put a $50 million contribution into a fund. The University of Virginia came right behind them and put in another $50 million. And then the private sector, private donor, some VC money came in and put in $150 million. So all of a sudden, there was a $250 million fund, going after an idea, chasing and establishing and buttressing an ecosystem. Those are the kinds of things that VCs can do as an opportunity to say, hey, if you go in first, or if you're there first, or how we can begin to create that, that can be really opportunistic. That will get our attention. That will get my attention and everybody else for kind of the way it comes. And then we'll begin to, really work hard about how we can leverage all of the resources we can to build off of that investment. Yep.
Last question.
Sure.
And then we have to.
Good afternoon, Ben July. Hey, Kevin. Quick question. So I appreciate the fact that this emphasis on making sure that we're meeting our goals as it relates to contracting.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, is there similar goals that that the state is thinking about in terms of investing in minority-owned funds or underrepresented funds, or is there any kind of thought towards how to utilize the state to actually help to step up, to stand up some of these funds that are being started?
So what do you mean, to support VC funds specifically, or just funds?
I think most of us talk about VC funds when we're talking about like setting up these funds, so yes.
Sure, I can't tell you off the top of my head about getting into the VC business, but we'll support, to the extent that you guys get connected to state-sponsored opportunity. I think our place in that operation is to, again, try and buy down and support as much risk as we possibly can with all of the funds that we have. And again, we'll use our leadership to fund a company, to get them started, to begin to provide infrastructure, to give them access to contracts, to begin to build it that way. And so that's where we're continuously and always investing and wanting to put more money in. Again, we have. I would dare someone to find another state. I would dare someone to find another state that doesn't have a more built-out infrastructure for supporting minority-owned and small businesses as we do. We have one of the best, they're connected with our small businesses. Is there more to do? Absolutely. We probably could do more. We want to do more. But that's what I hope is answering your question. Yep.
Well, Kevin, look, this was fantastic, giving us all a sense of ways that Maryland is investing in growth. And, look, this notion of buying down risk, where if we're able to track where that's happening, oftentimes new technologies start in the government, right? Because
exactly.
You all are able to take risks that we can't.
Yeah.
So being able to track that is super helpful. As you mentioned, the public-private partnership work, a lot of the work that TEDCO's doing, whether it's directly in minority funds or directly in minority companies, it just seems like up and down the stack, Maryland's doing a lot of great work. So we really appreciate you spending the time.
Thank you, Phil. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me. And if Maurice or Phil calls me again, I will be here. It's good to be here to help. Thank you.